Welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus Podcast. I'm John, Father John Deere, and today I'm speaking with Paul Chappell, longtime teacher of peace. This is a project of www.beatitudecenter.org, where you can find many other podcasts and regular Zoom programs on the nonviolence of Jesus and practicing nonviolence and working for a more just, more nonviolent world. So let's begin, as I always do, with a little prayer. So I invite everyone listening just to take a deep breath wherever you are and to relax. And just notice how you're feeling and recenter yourself in your peace. And together let's enter into the presence of the God of peace, who loves you infinitely and personally and everyone everywhere. And let's welcome the nonviolent Jesus here with us and ask for whatever graces we need to follow him on the path of nonviolence and do God's will of peace. God of peace, thank you for all the blessings of life, love, and peace that you give us. Be with us now as we reflect together with Paul on your call to walk the path of peace and work for a more nonviolent, more just world like Jesus. Bless us, inspire us, disarm us, heal us, strengthen us, and send us out to do your will, to do our part, to help abolish war and weapons and the causes of war and injustice and greed and environmental destruction, that we might be your holy peacemakers and welcome your reign of universal love, nonviolence, and peace on earth. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, it's a pleasure to welcome Paul Chappell today to our podcast. Paul is an international peace educator and founder of Peace Literacy. He graduated from West Point, was deployed to Iraq, left active duty as a captain, then realizing that, as he says, humanity is facing new challenges that require us to become as well-trained in waging peace as soldiers are in waging war. He founded Peace Literacy to help students and adults from all backgrounds work toward their full potential as peacemakers for a more peaceful world. So Peace Literacy teaches that peace is not merely a goal, but a practical skill set. Just like we have to learn how to read and write, we have to learn the skills of peace, and that it needs to be taught, kindergarten through higher ed. So Paul grew up as his biography says, Paul, a violent household. Born in 1980, he was raised in Alabama, the son of a Korean mother and a black father who was a veteran of the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Paul is the author of a 6-book series, the Road to Peace series, and here are the titles of these books, little wonderful books that you can get online. Will War Ever End? The End of War, Peaceful Revolution, The Art of Waging Peace, The Cosmic Ocean, Soldiers of Peace. So you can visit Paul's website at paulkchappell.com. That's paulkchappella.com. Paul, welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus Podcast.
Thank you, John, for having me. Thank you so much.
So let's begin with your extraordinary story, your turn from being a U.S. Army captain to founder of this great organization of peace literacy and being a leading voice for peace education around the country and maybe the world in every grade. As you say, just as we have to learn to read and write, we need to learn the skills of peace. So however you want to go, Paul, tell us what happened and what led to this amazing work you're doing these days with peace literacy.
Yeah, thank you. It started in my childhood. There's a few different causes. One is you mentioned, growing up in a violent household, multiracial in Alabama, and growing up in a traumatic upbringing, having developed a lot of behavioral problems as a child. I was kicked out of elementary school, almost kicked out of middle school, suspended in high school, and dealing with things like rage and mistrust and alienation from childhood trauma. The K through 12 education system had not given me any tools for how to deal with rage, trauma, alienation, mistrust. And we're seeing how rage, mistrust, alienation are tearing apart our social fabric, our civil society, how rage, mistrust, alienation, other what we call tangles of trauma can be weaponized and manipulated by people. And I wasn't given any tools for how to navigate any of that. And a lot of what I learned from the culture that I was growing up in were things that were not conducive to peace or were contrary to creating a more peaceful world. And part of my initial motivation was, how do I heal rage, alienation, mistrust? And going to West Point, asking the question to myself and seeing how people were trained in waging war and people received excellent training in waging war in the military. But what if people were as well trained in waging peace as soldiers are in waging war? And that goes back to the idea that not only are we not taught how to wage peace in our culture, we're often taught the opposite of that.
Wow. So what is peace literacy? And tell us about the basic message and what you do in your workshops and programs.
Yeah, peace literacy, it's focusing on a skill-based approach to viewing peace not just as a goal, but also as a set of skills, as a literacy. And we focus on the human condition. A basic idea is that if we want to go to the moon, we have to understand the laws of physics. And if we want to create a more peaceful world, we have to understand the human condition. What is it about humans that makes things like injustice and violence and war possible? And then how do you reduce those factors? How do you reduce those root causes once you understand why we operate in these kinds of ways? I can just give you an example. So going back to looking at the human condition as a starting point, something we talk about is how humans have this natural aversion. We have a natural aversion to hurting and killing other humans. So we have a natural aversion to hurting and killing other humans. And all of military history shows that this is how we are. Every war, every genocide, every form of slavery, they all require dehumanization. There's never been a war, never been a form of slavery, never been a genocide that hasn't used dehumanization, as you know. And the purpose of dehumanization is to protect the mind from feeling guilt and remorse. If we hurt people and we think that they're like us, we'll feel guilty, we'll feel remorseful. And so dehumanization's purpose is to protect the mind from feeling that. And we talk about 6 different kinds of dehumanization that have occurred throughout history. We use a metaphor of a hydra, a 6-headed hydra of dehumanization. And I can just quickly go through these forms of dehumanization, which you're well aware of. The first one is psychological distance, which involves viewing people as subhuman or non-human in some way. And psychological distance always involves some kind of derogatory name calling. Going back, you can go back thousands of years and you can find psychological distance where people are viewed as subhuman. The Greeks viewing people as barbarians and viewing people as savages. And you look at dehumanization toward African Americans, always involves some kind of derogatory name calling. The second kind of dehumanization, the second form of distance, is moral distance, which is viewing people as irredeemably evil. And they're all evil, we're all good, God is on our side. And that's why civil wars are typically so bloody, because civil wars, because you have the same culture, they typically involve a lot of moral distance. I'm good, they're evil. And if you believe that people are evil, you can kill lots of people. If you believe that killing people is expelling evil from the world. The third kind of distance is mechanical distance, which means the farther away you are, the easier it is to kill people. It's easier to kill people by dropping bombs or using drones than it is to stab people or shoot people at close range. And Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman talks about those 3 kinds of distance in his book on killing. And we talk about 3 more heads of the Hydra. We talk about industrial distance, which involves viewing people as machines or objects or tools to be used, expendable tools. You can see that a lot with sex trafficking, where people are viewed as disposable objects to be used. Numerical distance, which involves viewing people as numbers, the way that numbers can strip people of their humanity. And then the 6th form is bureaucratic distance. And bureaucracy, of course, as you know, Romans had a huge bureaucracy. And the way that bureaucracy can create distance that removes people's humanity. And then we talk about 3 forms of rehumanization. How do we rehumanize people? The first form of rehumanization is interaction. That's why all dehumanization systems rely on some kind of segregation, is because interaction as a way to rehumanize people. The second form is storytelling and art. This is why slave narratives are so important. The narrative of Frederick Douglass and even novels like Uncle Tom's Cabin, because it rehumanized people. And then the third form of rehumanization is nonviolence. Nonviolence waging peace is such a potent, powerful way to rehumanize people. Nonviolence, as you know, refutes all the stereotypes that are created through dehumanization. All of those stereotypes, nonviolence pushes up against.
So, in part of your work, you ask these questions. I'm going to read your 3 questions and then ask, how do you actually do that? And how are you having any luck getting schools to do that? And I was interested in this 30 years ago when I ran this huge community center in the east side of Richmond, Virginia, for really impoverished, disenfranchised African Americans. So we had daycare, kindergarten, a full elementary school, and then their mothers taking classes while the school was going on. And I was desperate to figure out how to make it a center of nonviolence. And I found this program, Hands Are for Helping, Not Hurting. So we put those signs all over the building, and we required that as a motto for all the little children. And we were slowly teaching everyone nonviolence, but you've got this down to an art form. So here are your questions. What if people were as well trained in waging peace as soldiers are in waging war? What if people were trained to address root causes of problems rather than symptoms? What if we taught peace as a skill set, as a life-saving literacy with as much rigor as we teach reading and writing? And my dream, and I know there are people doing this, for example, there's a great educator working with the whole state of Rhode Island, trying to get nonviolence in every classroom. Gandhi said that's the future. Every class in the whole planet, at every level, has to teach nonviolent conflict resolution for the rest of humanity. That's the path. How are you actually doing that? Are you getting in schools? Are you able to train trainers or train educators? Or do you have pilot programs? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I know you know Bernard Lafayette really
Yeah,
well,
he's been on
civil
the
rights leader.
podcast. Yeah.
Yes, and you know the story where Martin Luther King Jr.'s last words to him were, "We need to we are going to institutionalize and internationalize nonviolence. That nonviolence has to be taught to people, like reading and writing is taught to people." And our approach has been so. Viewing peace as a literacy, when you think about reading and writing literacy and math literacy, you have the fundamentals. You have to learn how to count with mathematics before you can do addition and subtraction. You have to learn phonics and vowels and consonants with reading before you can deal with sentences and paragraphs. And we think there's a lot of fundamentals and basics that are skipped over in our culture. And for example, I grew up playing the violin, and you have to learn just basic intonation and how to play a scale. And dealing with things like racism, it's more like trigonometry or playing more an advanced piece. It's more complex. And a lot of times we talk about these very big picture things, and people don't have the fundamentals. They don't have the basics that can really help them understand those things and be able to frame those things in terms of human behavior. So we really focus on relevance. How do we make things relevant for people, where viewing nonviolence is a set of skills that is going to help people in their daily life. It's going to help them in their own personal life. It's going to help them in their relationships. It's going to help them in the workplace. It's going to help them interacting with people. Just we're bombarded with so many messages that can create confusion and hopelessness and despair and addiction. Being able to have tools that can help you navigate that is an important set of skills you can just use as a human being. But then you can use those skills for dealing with broader issues. Of course, you need to add more skills. So if you're going to play, Paganini in the violin, you need more skills in addition to what the basic skills are going to be, but you still have to have those basic skills of intonation, being able to play in tune, things like that. So what we found is the traction we have been getting in schools with students and educators educators find is useful for their own lives. They say, well, this is helpful for my colleagues dealing with students. It's helpful dealing with the administration. It's helpful with dealing with an angry parent who's calling. And if we can't make this something that people are going to find useful, we really think of nonviolence as like a refrigerator. If it's a useful tool, people are going to use it. And if we can make it useful for people, that's a starting point where it can start to gain traction. And then once people find it useful, then they often want to know more, because there's more ways in which this can help us solve human problems on a small scale, but also a much larger national and global scale.
Well, thank you. That's very exciting. What kind of reaction have you been finding over the years in these programs and workshops you've been doing? You've been all over the country, right, Paul?
Yes. I think, something we've been saying for a number of years is we've been saying how the most dangerous weapons in the 21st century are not bullets and bombs. The most dangerous weapons in the 21st century are the weaponization of rage, mistrust, alienation, and other tangles of trauma, nihilism, cynicism, and how the weaponization of those tangles of trauma and the manipulation of those tangles of trauma make all forms of violence more likely. That what we're seeing now is the most dangerous weapons of war are really manipulating and leveraging and weaponizing people's rage, their mistrust, their alienation. And that's going to make that's going to make nuclear war more likely to happen. And I think with social media and what people are seeing in terms of the civil discourse in the US, a lot of these issues are really hitting home for them. And talking about social media, for example, is a peace issue, right? Where does propaganda do most of its work today? It's on social media. And where do these messages of violence really start to proliferate? A lot of it's in social media. That's given us a way to talk about these issues, where thinking of social media is one of the most urgent peace issues that we have to deal with, because of how it affects every other issue that people care about.
So you've been doing this for years now and trying to teach and organize the teaching of peace and stress how important this peace education is for all of us everywhere, especially for a new generation. How has all of this given you hope, given the state of the world and the Trump administration, and we seem to be closer to nuclear war than ever, and environmental destruction, and not to mention the horrific slaughter in Gaza and Ukraine, Africa, the violence on our streets, gun violence. So has this been a hopeful experience for you, and where are you seeing hope in young people who are learning the art of peacemaking?
That's a great question. For a number of years, I've been talking about, if we don't teach people peace literacy, if we don't teach people nonviolence, and we're teaching people the opposite, that's not going to be a good outcome, right? And I think a lot of people got complacent. They just thought that peace is inevitable. We talk a lot about how war is not inevitable. We talk about how humans are not naturally violent, yet humans can become incredibly violent through trauma and other forms of trauma, manipulation, things like that can propel people into extremely violent behavior. And we aren't teaching people any of these tools or skills. We're teaching people the opposite, and we're seeing the consequences of that. So just as the idea that war is inevitable is very dangerous, the idea that peace is inevitable is also very dangerous. People think, well, we're just on this trajectory toward a more peaceful and just world. It's all written in stone. We don't have to do anything. And we're just going to have a more peaceful world. It's just going to be an inevitable result of just the forces of history, when we really have to do something to push humanity in that direction. And so what's happening now are things that I thought were going to happen for a number of years. In March of 2016, I was telling people I thought Donald Trump would win at least 2 terms. And when he lost, I thought he was going to win in 2020. But when he lost in 2020, I was saying, I never said there were going to be consecutive terms. I think he's going to win in 2024. And I think that there are traumas and pains, and there are hungers in our society that aren't being addressed and that are being ignored and neglected. And there's an appetite for things that we aren't addressing in a way that's going to help deal with those root causes. So if we don't teach peace and don't teach peace literacy and don't teach nonviolence, right, this is necessary for human survival. And if what we're seeing in the world today doesn't show that, I'm not sure what does.
Yeah. As you know, I've been talking about and teaching nonviolence, specifically using that word, for 45 years in every venue I can think of until they kick me out. And, it's just, I don't know if it's the word, it's such a limited, clumsy word, or you just can't go far. In New Mexico, where I lived for years, the birthplace of the bomb, I spoke at the high school in Los Alamos, and all those kids' parents are millionaires building nuclear weapons. And they said, hey, our parents told us we're the greatest peacemakers in the world. We know all about peace. We are the peacemakers because we built the bomb. So it's really tough. So that's why I stick with this word nonviolence, and I so appreciate that you do. But one of the things I've tried to do is keep asking people, even though it's such a clumsy word, but Gandhi used it morning, noon, and night, and then so did Martin Luther King. And it's yet to be co-opted by the culture, whereas the word peace has, and so is the word love. So I keep asking folks to define it, and I keep trying to define it in my books and lectures and stuff. How would you define it? So what are the ingredients, and when you say the word nonviolence, what does it mean for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a number of things, just like mathematics is a number of things, and music is a number of things. It is, as you know, a lifestyle. It is a way of being. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of acting. It's a way of moving through the world. It's an understanding. It's a set of skills that we use. And I think it comes back to so many fundamental things that are part of being human. And something that we talk about is the idea that there's different depths of knowing something. There's different depths of understanding. So I can know intellectually that a spider, a small non-poisonous spider can't hurt me. I can know that on intellectual level. I could write a 5-page essay about how this small non-poisonous spider can't hurt me. But when it's on my arm, I might be shaking in fear, right? I might be very nervous because I know it on an intellectual level, but I don't know it on this deeper unconscious level. And in a similar way, I can know intellectually that I'm not going to fall off a balcony. And I can write a 5-page essay about that. I know it on that intellectual level, but when I'm on the balcony, I'm shivering and I'm shaking and my knees are buckling. And a lot of ideas about nonviolence, people know it on this intellectual level, but they don't know it on this deeper unconscious level, right? They don't know it on this more experiential level where you see someone's humanity in a way that's it's visceral. And so part of the teaching, as you know, is getting that intellectual understanding across, which is an important thing for framing ideas. But then how do we internalize that knowledge? And so a big part of nonviolence is the deep knowing that is harder to do. So the education around nonviolence and the practice of nonviolence has to involve that deeper knowing, so that when you're on the balcony, when you're dealing with a non-poisonous spider, you know it on this more unconscious level that's deep and feels like it's deep in your bones. And that process can take a lot of effort, and that's something we have to think about how we do in terms of educating people.
That's so great, Paul. I spoke to a lot of Buddhists this weekend, and I was trying to unpack this word with them and how Gandhi first used the clumsy Jain word ahimsa, meaning do no harm in thought, word, or deed. And I said, okay, folks, you're holy Buddhist peacemakers. Let's look at that. You're never going to hurt another person ever again for the rest of your life. You're never going to say another harmful word to another person for the rest of your life. You're never going to think another harmful thought to another person for the rest of your life. And everyone broke out laughing. And these were Buddhists in meditation. And yet Gandhi said, as you said it, the deep the deep, how did you call it? The deeper level of
Knowing.
deep knowing. That's such a beautiful, interesting, mysterious phrase. I would call it a spirituality of nonviolence, trusting in however you would name God or higher power. But Gandhi goes so far as to say that active creative nonviolence is a force of truth and universal love more powerful than all the weapons of the world combined. So he went really deep in deep knowing, perhaps more than anyone in thousands of years. And how do we teach that, Paul? You know, that peace itself, what we're talking about, is not just sitting around doing nothing or boredom, but is a oneness with creation. And, you know, you could see it, in, whether it's in Gandhi's struggle to get the British to leave or Dr. King to end segregation, or all the scores of nonviolent movements in recent decades, that if people stand up together in people-powered nonviolent movements, the structures and forces of violence will back down. How do you teach that, Paul? This is what I've been trying to figure out, and I'm not sure about it. I had a lot of conversations with Jim Lawson, the civil rights leader and legendary teacher of nonviolence. So specifically, Paul, I'm getting at what's it like for you to talk about the word nonviolence, since you're a teacher of teaching on this?
I can respond to that. I want to go back to something you asked earlier. I don't know if I responded to it
Sure.
fully. You asked about what leaves me hopeful.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I feel hope that we can understand these problems. If we couldn't comprehend why people are doing what they're doing and it was just bewildering, that would leave me hopeless. But I really think there are explainable causes for why we're doing what we're doing, and there is a path out of it. And so if we can predict behavior and we understand why that behavior is happening and we have a path out of it, that leaves me hopeful. And it doesn't matter how bad things seem to get, there is a path. And I think going back to what you asked just about nonviolence is the deeper knowing, the deeper depths of understanding and knowing, where you not just you see, but you feel, you know, in this deeper way, the dignity of human life and animal life. It uplifts you. It uplifts everyone around you. The path of trauma is just a dead end road to misery. It doesn't uplift anyone. It hurts people around you. This is the path out of the pain and the madness that people feel. And succumbing to rage and mistrust and alienation, it's not good for you. It's not good for anyone around you. It's not good for the country. It's not good for the world. So the fact that nonviolence helps people and uplifts people, this is the path that we need to take, and people can benefit from it as they move through that process. That also leaves me very hopeful. Now, the question you asked is, how do we teach that? And that's something that we have been working on for a number of years. And as you know, the challenge with education that makes it so different from other things is everyone's invited to the party. We have to figure out how to teach reading and writing and mathematics to everybody. We have to try to help everybody understand these things. And it doesn't matter if people have different, learning abilities and things like that. We have to figure out how to make this work for everyone in our society. And we have to provide the resources necessary for that. And so we've been working for a number of years because, like reading and writing and mathematics, if you start early, that's going to be advantageous. If you can start teaching the building blocks of this at a young age, and then as people get older, you can teach them new and more complex things. And I'd love to talk more about that, but that's something we've been working on. And that's the biggest challenge, is how do you teach this in a way where people are really going to be able to internalize it and live the ideas.
Well, thank you. Well, I think it's maybe the most important thing we can do with our lives, and everyone at every level, wherever you are, whatever age, can go forth and talk about peace and nonviolence, and how can we be more nonviolent to ourselves and one another and our families and our communities and our churches, especially in the schools, and then in our politics, and then toward the world. And that's why I so wanted to have you talk on this podcast to encourage people to be peace educators and teachers, and I wanted people to know about you. You've written this beautiful, marvelous little 6-volume series of small, accessible books. You call it the Road to Peace series. And so tell me a little bit about that and what your hope and your message there in your books.
Oh, yes. I just had a realization. There is a way for me to talk about a little bit about how we can teach this that I just remembered. We talk
Sure.
about three different ways to teach nonviolence and peace literacy. The first way is through curriculum, and that's a whole process. How do we make that curriculum accessible to different ages? How do we scaffold the information for different age groups? That's important. The second way we teach nonviolence is through example. And humans learn a lot through example, through the example of other people, just observing and seeing their behavior or being a recipient of their behavior. So example is incredibly important. We need people to be an example of this. And we don't see a lot of examples. There are many examples today, but they're not the examples that are typically held up in our culture or in the popular media. Example is critically important. And then the third way is through culture. So if we are going to teach nonviolence, it has to be through curriculum. We have to think of it like a literacy, like reading and writing and mathematics, and we have to devote those same resources and that same rigor and commitment and focus. And then we have to teach it through our own example, and that's an incredibly powerful teaching tool, right? The example you offer, the example other peacemakers offer, the example people can offer in their homes and their communities, and then we have to build a culture that can also teach and reinforce nonviolence.
It's great. And with our work with Pope Francis, we got him writing that and saying that around the world, calling for new cultures of nonviolence. And that I've never heard that phrase until like 10 years ago in Rome. And I love that. And it just lifts up a new image or engages our imagination. Do you want to say anything about your books? And then we'll probably have to wrap it up because we're out of time.
And they focus on war. They mainly focus on the human condition and some of the building blocks for peace literacy, which is thinking about the human condition, thinking about non-physical needs that are so important for people: purpose and meaning, belonging, self-worth, and the need for expression, the need for explanations. And when we don't have those needs met in healthy ways, we will meet those needs in unhealthy ways. If we don't have healthy purpose and meaning in life, if we don't have accurate explanations for things, if we don't have healthy forms of expression, if we don't have healthy forms of self-worth and belonging, we will feed that hunger in unhealthy ways. And it covers a number of concepts that form some of the building blocks of peace literacy. And our website, peaceliteracy.org, has free curriculum and all kinds of resources for people.
Oh, so tell me more about that, peaceliteracy.org. And can they get your books on that website too?
Yeah, there's a link there. And for example, the information on dehumanization, rehumanization, the curriculum we offer, information about the online courses, and educators. Peace literacy is taught in a number of schools in Ohio and Canada and in refugee camp in Uganda and California, Oregon. It's taught in a number of different places, and it's really a grassroots movement. We're a nonprofit, so we try to do everything we can to help educators incorporate this into their teaching and into their interactions with other people. And we're glad to support anyone who would like to reach out to us at our website.
Great. So I hope everyone listening can go and check out Paul's website, peaceliteracy.org, especially to get materials about teaching peace in schools or to get them to teachers. Paul, we're really unfortunately out of time, but is there anything else you'd like to say before we end?
I'm just really grateful for all you do for peace, John, and the work becomes more urgently needed every day. The case for the important necessity of nonviolence becomes more obvious every day, and I'm hopeful, and that hope is, I call it realistic hope. It's hope based on things that we have to do, and we can't succumb to despair, but we also can't succumb to naive hope that things are going to work themselves out if we don't move humanity forward.
Well, thank you so much, Paul Chappell, for speaking with me. It's been a blessing. And thank you, friends, for listening to the Nonviolent Jesus Podcast. You can hear more podcasts and find other upcoming Zoom programs at beatitudecenter.org. And please consider offering a donation to support this free work. And if you can, please leave some positive feedback or a review at the National Catholic Reporter, or maybe write them a letter to the editor, or Apple, or Spotify, or YouTube, or whatever platform you use. And most of all, friends, please help spread the word of the podcast by telling your friends and colleagues and other church folk. So may the God of peace bless you all, and keep on following the nonviolent Jesus. See you next time.